Hi everyone, today I wanted to do a really fast introduction into making interactive data visualizations in Svelte, and it's going to be so fast that we can do it all in the browser using the Svelte playground. So you just go to svelte.com, go to the playground, and now you are fully set up and have everything you need to follow along. We're going to learn how to make a really quick and dirty bare bones scatter plot that covers all of the fundamentals for everything you need to know to make more advanced data visualizations. So we're going to handle scales, we're going to handle interactivity, and we're also going to handle a little bit of animations. So follow along and let's get into it. The first and most important part that you need to get when you're making a data visualization is the why. What question are you trying to answer and what are you trying to show people? And inspiration for that can come from any corner of life. So for example, let's say that you're watching sports. And naturally, what you want to know is what makes for the most successful piglet in pig racing. And the first step of that process is getting to the drawing board. So what are the basic components of a data visualization? Well, first, you of course have the canvas. And then on that, of course, you'll expect to see the basic bones of it, including the axes, and then the x-axis, your labels. So let's say we want to see the weight of the pig, and see how that affects the race time of the pig. And then we of course expect to see some data on it. And so right now I think we have everything we need to start getting to the code. And so now that we have a general idea of the domain we're trying to ask questions in and the general structure of how we're going to do that, we actually need data. And so where are we going to get that? Thankfully, my wife and I, as we watch League of Pigs, we have been collecting some data with a stopwatch of just the results of the races and the race times. And so this is some data we can use. The first thing that we want to make is an SVG. And this is going to be our canvas where the actual plot goes. And so that you can see it better, let's give it a style. So let's select the SVG and let's give it a background color of white. There we go. And now let's give it a size. Let's say that it should be, let's actually give it a size up here. Let's say that it should be, the chart width should be, let's say 400 pixels wide. Give this a width of chart width. And give it a height of 400 as well. And then give it a height of chart height. There we go, that looks pretty good. Let me zoom out a little bit, there we go. Actually, I'll zoom in a bit. And now that we have the canvas where our chart goes, we actually have to think about where do the actual parts of it go. So when you look at, and now that we have our canvas that we're gonna work with, we have to look and think about where the actual data part of the chart is gonna go. So when we come here, that is pretty much right in here. This is where the data goes. And so where does this box go? As you can see, there's space above it, below it, to the left, and to the right. And so let's kind of position where we want the data to be. So first, let's just make a rectangle to visualize it. We'll give it a fill of red, just so that we can see it. And we need to give it a width of, let's say, 150 and a height of 100. And there's our rectangle. And now that we have this rectangle, let's think of how we position it. The point that we can see that it was drawn at is actually at this top left corner. So for example, if I give it an X position, if I give it an X position as 0, let me write it like this, it's over there. If I make it 10 pixels, 20 pixels, 30 pixels, you can see it's moving from the left with the top left corner of it. And then if I give it a Y value of, let's say 0 pixels, and I change that to 10, 20, 30, you can see that it's moving down now, about 30 pixels on top and then 30 pixels on the left. So instead of doing it on the rectangle, because we want this to apply to every single element in here, I don't want to push everything to the left and from the top by 30 pixels each. Let's wrap it all inside of a group. And so you do that with the G tag. Let's expand that and put the rectangle inside. And you'll see right now nothing is different. So let's get rid of this. And we're back to square one. What we can do now is style this group, give it a transform, translate, and we're gonna move that over by, let's say, same thing. Let's get rid of those, 30 pixels, and then 30 pixels. And you can see, there we go. This is the X. So if I change that to 50, it's moving over a bit more. And if I change this to 90, it's moving down. Great. So now we can adjust pretty much everything we need. We can position it exactly where we want it to be, and then we can make it as big as we'd like it to be. But let's make this a little easier for ourselves as developers. So coming back over here, you can see that we have a space here, and this is the top margin that we push it down. And then we have a space over here. This is the left. And then we have the right over here, which is a bit bigger here. And then we have the bottom margin. So now if we want to look at, for example, with the chart about this, where the actual data is, it's positioned the left margin from the left. And then the width of it here, you can see, is the whole width of this white container minus the right margin minus the left margin. And then it's the same for the vertical positioning. So let's get to making this a bit easier for us. So let's make a margin and let's give it everything we want. Let's give it a top. Let's just set it at, I don't know, 20 pixels. Right, we'll set it to 20 as well. Bottom 20, left 20. And now for what we actually call the chart, where it has the data, let's just call that the inner chart, because this whole canvas, the white part, is technically like all the chart, where it includes the labels and the title if we added one and everything, but let's just call the inner chart where the actual data goes. That's our kind of data box. So let's say that the inner chart width is going to be equal to, that's going to be equal to the chart width. And let's actually just stick with that for now. So let's give this rectangle a chart width of inner chart width. And there we see, it's kind of going all the way, it's going off, and it's because it's positioned to the left. So right now, if this is 400 pixels, this red thing is 400 pixels as well, but because it's offset, it's ending right over here. So we don't want exactly that. So let's subtract the margin.left minus the margin.right. And that's looking a bit better, but let's make everything kind of part of that system. So it should actually be pushed over by margin.left. So now you can see if I increase the left margin, you can see if I do 50, or let's make it actually bigger, let's make it like 200, you can see that it's starting over here, 200 pixels from the left side of the canvas. So let's bring that back down to 20. And now let's do the same for the height. Let's now, instead of making this 50, let's make this margin dot height. Whoops, margin dot top. And there we go. Now the top of it, if I add another 0 here, it pushes it down by 200 pixels. There we go. And the height of this should now be, well, we have to make an inner chart height. And we don't have that right now, so we're gonna have to say let inner chart height is equal to chart height minus margin dot top minus margin dot bottom. And now we have a chart that has pretty much all of this. So if we want to make it look more like this, let's give it a top margin of, let's say, 100 pixels. Let's make it more like 50. Let's give it a left of about, say about 50 as well. Let's give it a bottom margin of maybe 40, 50. Actually, let's just go 50 everywhere. That's looking better. And then from the right, 50. There we go. So that's much easier to work with. But an issue is that it's not responsive. So if I squish the page down, this chart does not care. So let's fix that. Let's make it actually responsive to the container that it's inside of. So let's wrap the whole thing in a div. So I'll take this, I'll move this over, delete this, highlight everything, hit tab, and nothing is different. But what I can do now is this chart width, which is the SVG here, I can bind to this div. And the div here, if we inspect it, so let's see, we have our SVG, and you can see, well, you can't see anything right now. You can see this SVG is in a div, and the div here seems to be occupying pretty much all the space that's available. This Svelte project seems to have a bit of a padding, but the div is taking up all the width it can. So I would like the width of this chart here to take up the width that it can, which is what the div is doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bind to the width of it. So you're going to bind to the client width is equal to chart width. So what this is going to do is the Svelte is going to look at the width of this div, and it's going to say, okay, I'm going to update the chart width variable to be that. So we started at 400, but now you can see it's already changed where it is the exact same width as this. And what you can see is it is now a bit more responsive. And you'll notice right now that when I move it, it's not fully responsive. And the reason for that is with Svelte, when you have a variable that you want to change or react to things, like if you want this to be a piece of state, you actually have to say that, hey, this should be a piece of state for the amount of chart width, just because we expect it to update. And now Svelte is going to complain and say, hey, this chart width here, this reference only captures the initial value of chart width. Like, this isn't going to respond to that, because as you see right now, the chart width might be, let's say 500 pixels, but now it's 300 pixels. And as you see, the red rectangle is not responding to that. And so what you need to do is you just need to wrap this in parentheses and you need to write derived. And so let's do that for both of these. And so what you're telling is that this variable here, just all the calculations in here should be listening to any changes in this and respond to that. So now what we can see is, there we go. Now this is fully responsive. Just to do a quick recap of what's happening right now, we initialized the chart width at 400, although this number doesn't really matter. I could make it 4, 3, and as you see, it changes nothing because what's happening is that, let me just put it back to 400, but what's happening is that we instantiate this and we bind it to this div, and so this will update to become whatever the width is of the div that we're inside, and the div always naturally takes up the full width that it can, and it's going to update this, so instead of being 400, it's going to be, I don't know, 500, 200, whatever the width of this is, and then what we're going to do is, the inner chart width is now going to be whatever the width of this white rectangle is, minus the preset left and right widths, and then there we go. That's the inner chart width, and then you can see that the inner chart width here is the width of our rectangle. And so now, just like that, everything pretty quickly and easily just works, and we can just change it. So there we go. Our chart is now responsive. That's step one done. This is exactly how you're going to do it in every other project going forwards. You're going to create your margin object just like this. You're going to make your inner chart width and inner chart height. And you're going to set up an SVG and a group element on the outside just like that. And there we go. That's step one done. But now let's make it look more like a chart. So for that, let's start with these axes right here. And so what is that? There's no magic here. It is just a line. So right now, let's give that a stroke of black so we can see it. And now we have to position it somewhere. So let's say that, let's start in the top left corner. So the X1 is going to be equal to, I'll write it here so that things don't explode when I'm typing. And then Y1, so it's going to start at 0, 0. And then let's just kind of move it around and see what happens. So let's see what happens if I say X is equal to 20 pixels. We want X2. Oh, I see a little line forming right there. And now let's make that a bit bigger. Let's give it 200 pixels, and let's make the Y2 equal to, let's say 300 pixels. Oh, so there's a line. And let's make it a bit thicker so that we can see it. So let's give it a stroke width of, let's say 2 pixels. There we go. So we can see that. And now what I can do is I can say 250, I could say 290, and you can see that it's moving it. So what's happening is we have the starting position, which is, 0, 0, right here in the top left corner. And then we have the end position for x2, y2. And so that is 290, 200 pixels. So 290 from the left. And in web development, you don't work with, Cartesian coordinate systems where 0, 0 is in the bottom left corner. It is in the top, unfortunately. So that means you go 200 pixels down. And that's how you end up here. But what we want is we want it to be at the bottom here. And so what should we do here? Should we just kind of play around with it until we get the numbers that we're looking for? No, not quite. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the variables we have. So we want to actually start this at, we're going to use the variable here. We're going to start it at inner chart, not width. We're going to start it at the inner chart height. So now starting at 0 and whatever the inner chart height is. And then we want it to go all the way to the right, which is going to be the inner chart height. And we want the Y position, the end of it, to still be over at inner chart height at the bottom. Oh, and I made a mistake here. This is actually going the height to the right. We actually want this to be inner chart width. There we go. And you can see we have the line all the way there at the bottom. And let's make it even thicker so we can see it. 4 pixels. There we go. And now let's do the same exact thing for the y-axis. So you're going to make a line. And so that's actually going to start at 0. And then the y one is going to still be 0. And then x2, which is going to be over here, we want it to still be 0. So we're going to say x2 is equal to 0. And now the y2 is going to be all the way at the bottom. So that's going to be inner chart height. And you can't see it right now because we need to make it black. And then we're going to make the stroke width equal to 4 pixels is what I think I made the other one. And there we go. That is now the chart. So let's get rid of the rectangle. We don't need that anymore. And there we go. So here's the left and the bottom axis of the chart. That's looking pretty good so far. So I think it's time to put some data in there. And now here's where things start getting a little more involved, because first of all, how do we even get our data? Well, let's start it like this. Let's make an array of our data. So let's say data is equal to an empty array. And since this is going to change, we're going to wrap this in state. Whoops, $state. And then what we're going to do is, we don't need this. We are going to, and we don't need this either. I've already welcomed you to the video. And so what we're going to do is we're going to import onMount from Svelte. And so this is a built-in function in Svelte where it's going to be a function that only runs when the application first starts. And so what do we do in this? Well, first what we could just do is say hi. And you can see in the console, it says hi. There we go. And here's a good place to fetch our data because right now we have it in a GitHub repository, but it's not doing anybody any good just sitting here. What we want to do is bring it into here and actually visualize it. So how we do that is we get access to the raw CSV file. So as you see data.csv there, let's copy this link, come back over here, and then how are we actually going to get this link here? Because I can't just do this. This is just going to set data to a string. That's not going to work. What we want to do is import a library called D3. And we're going to import it from D3. And what we can do is we can fetch the data. So let's do that. So let's say data is equal to d3.csv, because we're fetching a CSV, and we're going to fetch this link. So this is going to get the CSV data from the CSV link. So now that we're doing that, let's inspect what is the actual data that we have. So let's take a look. And we have some sort of issue here. Aha, it's a promise because this is an asynchronous function. Like in JavaScript, if I want to know, what is the result of 2 plus 3 or 2 plus 4, JavaScript is just going to run this instantly and give me 6. But when you're actually clicking on a website and reloading it, it takes a bit of time, so you have to tell JavaScript that, hey, this function needs to have the ability to await the response. And there we go. Once we do that, you can see here is our data. Let's quickly go over the data just over here so we can see it. Each row here in the data has the name of the pig, be that Pepper Sanchez or Piggy Smalls, various information about the season, round, and race that they're running in, as well as the date, and then some dimensions of each of the pigs, their length, height, waist, and height, and, you know, their sex, how they did in that race, their exact race time, their race position, and then various elements about the track, whether it had hoops and hurdles and hedge jumps and whatnot. And we can see if we go back over here, our data has all that, and each of these entries is a row. So we have 70 rows, because there's 70 here. And then you can see that there's 70 here. And each one, if we expand it, you can see that here we have Piggy Smalls, you know, season 1, round 1, the date, and everything that we want to know. His length, his height, his waist, his weight. And so let's work with it. But before we do that, we can't just work with this like this, because let's take a look. So if we say his length is 25, so let's do that over here. So let's just make, you know, let my length is equal to 25. And then let's let height, my height is equal to 15, just as is written here in strings. And let's see what happens if we add them together. My length plus my height. That does not seem how math works. And the reason for that is because it's actually taking the string 25 and adding it to the string of 15, in the same way that if we said hello plus, you know, an empty space plus YouTube, and I hit enter, that's going to combine the strings hello plus an empty space plus YouTube to hello space YouTube. But we want numbers to actually be numbers, not just, you know, text. So what we can do for that is we can modify this as it comes in. So if I do a comma here, I take the row, and then I return a new object from that. What I can do is just spread the entire row into there, ... row. And so now nothing's different. What we're doing is we're just taking the row, and then this is returning directly a new object, which is exactly the row that was passed in, and nothing is different. But what we can pretty quickly and easily do now is override some of the fields. So let's say height here. So the height property should actually be row.height, and let's just say plus high because it's a string. And as you see, it will be, for any given pig, the height will be 13 high, but we don't want that at all. We want it to actually be a number. So what you can easily do here is just coerce this string into a number by adding a plus here. You could also say number like this. And if we open any of the pigs, you can see right now it's a purple because it's not a string, it's an actual number that we can work with as a number. But just because it's a little more terse, I'm going to just use plus there, and it works the same exact way where now any given pig, the height is 13. So I'm going to do this for all the other number fields and just edit it in so you don't have to see all that. There we go. We're giving the same treatment to everything else. The season, the round, the race, length, height, waist, and the rest. And specifically for is male, if I just comment that out, you'll see that we want to work with a Boolean. That's another data type. So you can see here is male. It's the string of just false. So I'm just going to set it if the string. So I'm going to set it to the result of that string being equal to true. So if it's equal to true, this will evaluate to just be true. If it's not equal to the string of all caps true, it will be false. So you can see that for Ginger Hamilton, it is, oh, not what I want. Oh, I see. It's because here, the string, oh, I made a mistake here. This here, you can see the property is space male, and I wrote is space male. So what it needs to be is actually like this. But JavaScript, you can't access it like that, so what we're gonna need to do is wrap this in strings and brackets, get rid of this dot, And now we can access that. And now you can see Ginger Hamilton, false over here. Great. And it still has is space mail here as false because it's like this, the string of false like this, but I didn't get rid of that property. I just added a new one, which is capital mail, one word, and then that's that over there. So we'll work with these properties here. Great, so let's put this down. And now what we want to do is, going back to it, let's take a look at, for example, the width of a pig. So let's take this. Oh, no, let's look at the weight. So right now what we want to do is, let's say that over here is going to be, 0 pounds. And over here, if the heaviest pig is, let's say 30 pounds, how do we position any given one of these points? So if we have a pig that's, let's say 15 pounds, where is it going to go? A pig that's 15 pounds is going to go right in the middle. And so how do we do that? Well, let's look at the data that we have right now. So if a pig's 15 pounds, we have that information. So if we open up the console, you can see that Hoshioinku here is 30 pounds. He's a pretty heavy pig. And so Hoshioinku in this chart is going to go right here at the very end. And so what that means we're actually doing here is we're taking Hoshioinku and we're putting him over here. We know that his weight is 30 pounds, and we know we want to put him on the end of the chart. So let's say that this here, the amount of pixels wide this is 0 pixels over here, and let's say this is 500 pixels. If Hoshioinku is 30 pounds, we want 30, the number 30, to turn into 500 for 500 pixels. If another pig is 15 pounds, we want to turn that into 250. And then if a pig is kind of in the middle, about 20 pounds, we want to put it around this kind of pixel range. So let's get to work on that. What we're going to do for that is from D3, we have a tool called Scale Linear. So let's get to work on that. So let's get our x scale is equal to d3.scaleLinear. And so what we have is we're going to give it the domain, which is the actual range of our data. So that will be, 0 to 30 pounds, however heavy we think a pig can be. So let's say 0 pounds, and let's put it 40 pounds is the max that we think a pig can be. And we're going to spread it across from 0 to, well, we want the data to actually be plotted between here, this point, and this point. And how far away is this in pixels? It's inner chart width. So we're going to put that over here. And you can see Svelte is complaining because this is a piece of state, because it's a derived piece of state. So what we need to do is just wrap this in another pair of parentheses. And this is derived from this derived. So now we have a scale. And what this scale is going to do is it's going to take any point, it's going to take any value from here, and it's going to spread that into values in here. So let's try it out in action. So let's make a circle. So let's take a circle here. And let's give it a radius of, let's say, 3 pixels. Let's give it a fill of red. And there's our circle over there. Let's make the circle a fair bit bigger. Let's give it a radius of 5. Let's give it a radius of 8. There we go. And so now how you position a circle is you give it because you position it by the center, so you say CX for center X is equal to, let's say 50 pixels. And then, CY is equal to, let's put it in the middle. So what we're going to do is we're going to say inner chart height. Right now it's going to put it at the bottom, and we're going to divide it by 2. And that will put it right in the middle there. But let's actually have it be dynamic. So let's say we have a pig. And let's pick a pig from here. So the weight of this pig is 21. And so where's the chart? Oh, it's not even working. So let's just do this again. So 10. So it's 10 pixels over here. But let's take the X scale and we'll give it a pig that's 21 pounds. And as you see, if this is 40 over here and this is 0, 20 is going to be right in the middle. And so let's take another pig who's heavier. Let's take a pig that's 35 pounds, Piggy Smalls, and let's put that in here. And you can see that's over here because the max is 40. We decided the max weight a pig could be 40. But let's say if we're saying, you know, a pig could be 100 pounds, that means that 40 is actually more here. Where if this is 0 pounds, this is 100 pounds, 40 is going to be over there. But as they say, one pig is never enough. So what we want to do is we want to loop over each of the pigs. So we're going to look at each of the data as a row. And now what we're going to do is we're going to actually make that circle. So, whoops, I deleted it, so let's bring it back. Let's give it a fill of red and a radius of 8 pixels. So there's our circle again. And now let's all give them the same CY of being inner chart height divided by 2, so they're just in the middle. And now let's give them a CX of, and we're going to use that X scale. And it's going to be row dot weight. And there we go. We have all the widths of our pigs. The weights of our pigs. And let's change this back to 40. And there we go. But it's a little burdensome to have to, you know, think like, because if I do the wrong number, I say 10 pounds. No pig is between 0 and 10 pounds. Every single pig is greater than 10 pounds. Yep, the lightest pig I see is 21 pounds. So if you accidentally make your max weight of a pig 10 pounds, 21 is way over here. So that's not going to work. So what we want to do is, instead of having to do this, let's actually look at what is the max, you know, what is the max weight of the pigs. So let's say D3.max, and let's look at the data. And for each of the data points, we will look at the data.weight. And now, so the end of it is over here. But right now it's, you know, it's a little abstract without seeing the actual numbers here. So let's add those in. So what we want to do is let's add some X ticks. So X ticks is equal to, let's just put it in a derived already because we know we're going to have to do that. So we're going to look at the X scale dot ticks. And so let's take a look at what that looks like. Let's inspect X ticks, and you can see that we are looking, because remember how our data is, oh yeah, because it's automatically going to about the max, which I think is 35 pounds for the max weight pig. Yeah, 35 pounds is who I see as the heaviest pig. So this over here is 35, and you can see that D3 just decided that it gave us these ticks. It gave us in increments of 5. So 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. So we have an array of these ticks. Let's actually go and use them. So we have our line over here, and which one is our bottom one? Oh, it's this one, because it's at inner chart height. Oops, I accidentally destroyed my chart because I hit Command Z a bunch of times and realized this editor does not have Command Shift Z to bring it back. Okay, so we're back now. But what we were doing beforehand is just saying that, hey, you know, we can mess this up. So if I get rid of this and I add in 20, you know, we're barely going to see it, and it's going to be off the chart because, for example, 10, no pig is less than 10 pounds. If we do 100, it kind of squeezes everything because no pig, especially if we do 1,000, like no pig is anywhere near 1,000 pounds. So, well, because these are piglets, but it's a lot of guesswork that we have to do, and we'd rather make our life easier by just seeing what's the max of the data and putting that as the right bound of our domain of data. And to make life even easier, instead of doing this, we could do d3.extent. And so it's going to get the minimum and the maximum of the data. And so what we want to look at again is for each of the rows, which I just refer to as D, I could call it row. Let's call it row. You look at the row.weight. And it's complaining because I have an extra parentheses here. It's complaining because that's extent, not extend, and I think it actually does need that parentheses. Oh, it's because this bracket shouldn't be there. There we go. And now we have each of the pigs here. And there's 4 points, even though there's 5 pigs, because 2 of the pigs have the same weight. So I believe the 2 pigs that have the same weight is 21, 27, 35, 30. Yeah, 21. So we have Bear and Pepper are both the lightest pigs at 21. There we go, that's 21. But this is looking a bit abstract. I would rather kind of actually know what the numbers are here. And so as you can see, what I did before I accidentally blew everything up was that I made these X ticks from the X scale, and it just provides us this out of the box. And you can see now that's actually doing increments of 1, and it's got a whole bunch of them. It's got 15 of them, and it's going from 21 to 35, which is the extent of the weights of our pigs. They go from 21 to 35. And so now this one, I believe, is our bottom one. Yep, that's our bottom one. Let's wrap this one in a group, and I'll show you why briefly, and I'll try not to destroy everything this time. So let's put this line inside. Absolutely nothing has changed. But let's add some zeros in here. So let's make the y1 equal to 0 as well. And this is still going to go the width of it, and then this is going to be 0. So now it's going over the top. But what we're going to do is we're going to transform this group now, transform, translate, and that's now going to go 0 to the left and right, and inner chart height pixels down. And now we're back to square one. Absolutely no difference so far, but now it's easier to just work with ticks in this region, because now we can loop over each of the X ticks as, whoops, I'm used to VS Code, so my commands are a bit off, as tick, and we could just add a number. So we can add some text, and the text will actually be that tick, because we're looping over these numbers now, and we're just going to put the number as the content of the text, and there it is. And where should that go? Where it should go is, well, let's put it down a little bit. So let's say the Y position should be about 10, 15, say 25. There we go, that looks pretty good. It's at the bottom over there. And now the X position, let's just feed that back into the X scale, and then that will decide where it goes on the X axis. And there we go. And you can see that the aligning of it seems to be a little off center. We want the text to be sort of middle aligned. And I believe the property for that off the top of my head is a dominant baseline. Okay, it's now centered up and down, but I think it's text align. And I think that's middle. It's not, let's see. So if you look it up, dominant baseline, because I know this one, as you see, like, you don't need to actually take notes or anything, because you just need to know what you want to do. Like, I just know that this text looks a little off. Like, this 35 here, it's aligned with the left side of the text. I want it to be aligned with the middle. I know what I want, but it's not, but I forgot how to do it exactly, so just use the internet. How to horizontally center SVG text. Text anchor, that's the one. It's text anchor, and so we're going to use middle. So let's go over here. It's not text align. It is text anchor. Now watch that 35, and boom, everything's shifted over to the left just a little bit, because now it's being positioned by the center of it, both from left and right, and top and bottom with the dominant baseline. And so there we go. So let me just kind of give a little tour of what we've done. Just, we could go from 0 to 50, and now this automatically adjusts. And it even adjusts. It's fully responsive still, which is pretty cool. But what we want is, instead of actually, messing around with it ourselves, let's let the computer do it. And there we go, from 21 to 35. There's our pigs. And now let's pick and now pretty easy, we could do the exact same thing we can make a Y scale. So let's put it over here. So that's going to be the same thing. It's going to be a linear scale. And the domain is going to say, let's say it's the extent of the data. And let's say for each of the rows, we want to look at the row.race time. And what that's going to do is, the range of it now, we're going to spread it over to 0 to inner chart height. And so let's try that out. Now that we have that, it's actually just as simple as coming down here. And instead of just putting them all in the center, we're going to do y scale of row dot, what did we do again? Oh, race time. And we can see it's not working. Oh, because see how we're going from 0 to inner chart width? In web development, you actually start with the inner chart height and go 0 because the upper left corner is over here. So what we can see right now is that it is still not working because I wrote extend, not extent again. And there we go. There's all the race times of the pigs. And so let's do the same exact treatment. I'm just going to, because it's the exact same treatment for the line here and adding the ticks, I'm going to fast forward that. So you can see me, I'm just going to do this, y ticks, same exact thing. We're going to get the y scale.ticks. And then in a Jiffy, I'm going to add the group element, wrap this in it, and then put all the ticks here on the left. So just a moment. Actually, no, I'm not going to edit this. I'm going to bring you along for the ride. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put the y tick in there. We have them all in the top corner. And now the x is we're going to be the one we're going to push over. So I'm going to make that negative 10 pixels. Ooh, that's got to be a fair bit more. 20, 30, 40. Let's go a little more. And you see, since it's now kind of too close to the left, we go up here and very quickly and easily just increase our left margin by 10 pixels. There we go. That looks a bit better to me. And now the y of this is going to be y scale of the tick. And there we go. You can see the pigs go from 9 seconds to 13 seconds of their race time, with the lower ones actually being the better race times. But as you see, it's the same exact stuff where we need to align it. So let's copy and paste over here. And let's put that over here. And there we go. Everything looks a little better. And now that I did that, let's actually move it a little less over. So let's do 35 pixels. That looks good to me. Great. This is starting to look like a real chart. And now let's give it actually some labels, while we're at it. Let's make it look even better. So now with these groups here, let's give it another piece of text for, what did we want to show? This is the weight here. So let's write weight. And that's over here. Where do we want to put it? We are going to put this one. Actually, this is the, let me see. Oh, these are the y ticks over here. So let's do the y label. So let's add some labels to this. So let's start with the bottom weight x label here. So beneath here in that group, I'm going to add text for weight. And that's over here in the bottom corner. It's not in the top corner because remember, this text element here is in the group here that is transformed to start at the bottom here. It's the point that it starts used to be 0, 0, which is already in a group that is brought from this 0, 0. So this group brings 0, 0 here. And then for these elements here, the 0, 0 of it was brought all the way inner chart height down. But what we want, well, let's first do the x value first. So the x of it is going to be inner chart height, inner chart width divided by 2. There we go. And I'm starting to get a little tired copying and pasting all this dominant baseline stuff. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go down here. We're going to select all text, and we're going to just give it these values. So dominant baseline is going to be middle, and then text anchor is going to be middle as well. There we go. So everything is now centered. And now that means we actually don't need any of this over here. And so this should make our code looks a little cleaner and better wherever else it might be, which is right here. Boom. Okay, everything's still centered because if you're a text element, you're getting these. And these guys are. So now we have the weight over here. And so let's push it down a bit. So now the Y value of it should be about, let's push it down by 20. Remember, not negative 20, because if we push it negative 20, it's actually going to bring it up. So let's actually do it in strings. If I do negative 50 pixels, because you would think that's going to bring it down, that actually brings it up. Because 0 is here and you actually count down. So let's actually bring it down by, let's say 50 pixels. Let's try that. That looks good to me. And so what we do now is we bring the bottom up a little bit. So let's say 70. That looks good. And now let's do the exact same thing for the Y label. But before we do that, see how I have weight here and then I have, so let's actually copy, so I have weight here and I have weight here. Let's make it life a little easier and you're gonna see why I'm doing this pretty quickly. Let's say our X property should be equal to weight, just the string of weight. And the reason I'm writing weight exactly like that is because weight is exactly the property we're looking for. So if I bring this up, you can see that weight here is spelled like that, and that's exactly how I'm spelling it here. So now what we can do with that is see how we have weight here, we have weight here, we have weight here. I'm going to just make it X property. I'm going to just say X property like that, and it's still weight. And then I'm going to say X property. And nothing has changed. But the reason I did that is because now it's very, very easy to change it. Because let's take a look at our data again. Let's say another property we have, like see how we have the weight? Let's take a look at the length of the pigs. So if I just change it right only here, boom, these are now the lengths of the pigs. They go from 20 to 25 inches. And now here are the weights. And you can see everything just changes magically like that. Let's do that for the Y property as well. Let's say the Y property is going to be equal to race time. So let's take that. And now anywhere that we see race time being used, not there because that's us actually making the data, we're going to do this, replace it with Y property, replace it with Y property, and this will just make life easier for doing some cool stuff as you see. And now let's actually make a label. So that was, I think this one. Yep, that's that one. So let's take that line and let's make a Y label. So let's get the text and let's do same thing, Y property. Boom, we have race time. Let's preemptively move things over to the left a bit. I scrolled by it. Let's just bring it over a fair amount. There we go, that should be good. Let's actually do a little more. Let's do 100. Let's do 95 actually. There we go, that should be enough room. And now we have, I probably scrolled by it. There it is. Let's bring that down. So the Y is going to be equal to inner chart height divided by 2. That brings it over there. And X is equal to, let's just make that negative 20 pixels. Negative 50 pixels. 60. Looking pretty good. And now let's rotate it. So how do we rotate this? So how we rotate this is we could just go and style it. Let's say bring back our transform. And instead of translating, we're going to rotate it by 90 degrees. And where did it go? Let's rotate it by 0. That's going to be normal. Let's rotate it by 5. Something's already feeling kind of weird. 15, 25. It's not rotating it like how we'd expect to just put a pin in the center and just move it around that. So in order for it to do that, for some reason, it just is not like that for text. I don't know why. Sometimes web development is like that, just weird stuff. Let's take this group element and put the transform on the group element, and then we can work from there. So let's actually not do any of this here. Let's just keep the text at 0, 0. There we go. See how it's kind of rotating it now in place? So if I do 45, 90, see how it's all just kind of working? Let's do negative 90 because that's the way we want. And in front of the rotate, we can now put a translate. And now here we can do negative 25 pixels, negative 20 pixels. say -30. I forgot what looked good. Was it 40, 50? Let's try 65. There we go. And now we're going to give it a y value of, and now here's where we're going to say inner chart height divided by 2. Oh, and we actually have to write pixels. There we go. So this line's a bit more complex just because now we're doing it with like groups and text. It's just, it wasn't working too well with rotating it and moving it at the same time when you do it all in the text element. But the group element, what we could do is just style it, translate it to the right position first. So if I get rid of this rotate, it's first, what it's doing is it's bringing it -65 pixels from here to the left, and then it's bringing it inner chart height divided by 2 down to place it in the middle here. And then once we do that, we will move the cursor around randomly, and then we're going to rotate it by -90. And so there we go. There's all of our labels. So I'd like to make this look a little better, and what's going to make it look better is some color. So how are we going to color them? Let's color them based on which pig it is, so their name. So let's do this. Let's set up another scale. We're going to set up a color scale. And let's set that in derived. And so that's going to be a scale, not a linear scale. It's going to be a scale ordinal. And the domain of that is going to be the name of the pigs. So let's just do, I don't know, let's do Ginger Hamilton is going to be, actually you have to put this in an array here. Ginger Hamilton will map to, so let's put a range here, orange. And you can see that Hoshi Oinku will be green. And so now that we have that, let's just do 2 pigs for now. Now that we have that, we'll go over here, and the fill will now be, instead of red, it will be the color scale at the row dot, well, let's actually do color property. I was about to just write dot name, but again, let's do the same thing. Let's go over here and let's say let color property is equal to name. And there you go. Right now it's not quite working just because I only put in 2 pigs, but let's put them all in. I'm gonna fast forward this. And there we go. And as you can see right now, we're already getting information from our data visualization that red and purple, which is Bear Trotsky and Pepper Sanchez, they are the exact same weights. They are both 21 pounds. And if we look at the data, you can see Pepper Sanchez, 21, and you can see Bear Trotsky, 21. But I don't know, for me at least, I feel like it's easier to just make a color map like this. Const color map will be, and we'll do the names of the pigs like this. Written in this, again, this has to be written exactly how it is in the data. So you can see Pepper space Sanchez, Ginger space Hamilton, all lowercase. So Ginger Hamilton goes to orange. And I'm just going to make the exact same, I'm going to make an object. I'm going to make an object that is pretty much the exact same thing that you see here, but it's just a little weird to see, you know, look at what's the third position here and then what's the third position here. It's a lot of scrolling, a lot of looking, and a lot of thinking, which I don't want to do. There we go. Now we have that finished, and I have all the properties and strings just because you can write it like this to be like, I don't know, yellow or whatever. But the thing is that the actual data has it with a space in it, and you can't do a space in the property name without wrapping it in these quotation marks. So now that we have this color map, instead of just writing down every single pig name here, these are just the keys. So we could just get object.keys of the color map, and then we just get the values. So object.values of the color map. And I accidentally misspelled Bear Trotsky. And there we go. Now bear is red. See, you have to make sure that these properties are exact. This is looking really good. So now let's make it interactive. So, and we're actually almost finished here. This is pretty much everything you need to make a chart. So see how we made this X property and Y property? Well, you know what? Let's go over here. And before this, let's do a div. And let's give the user the ability to select some things. So let's make a label. And so this is going to be whatever the X property is. And so to control that, we're going to make a select. And we're going to give them some options. So we're going to give an option of, let's say, the weight. And the value is going to be equal to lowercase weight. Here we could say whatever we want, like weight high. And that will be here. But the value of it is still weight, all lowercase. And that value is what's going to be used to access this, because it's weight. Because as you know, we're going to bind this now to X property. Bind value is equal to X property. So now this select is controlled by the X property, and it in turn, whatever you click here, will update the X property. So let's make another option to try it out. This one, we're going to make it the length of the pig. Let's make it capital. And then for the value, it's going to be lowercase length. There we go. And now that actually is everything to make the chart interactive. And it is currently not working. And let me see why. Aha, okay, I found why it's not working. And if you scroll up, you'll see that X property is updated, but is not declared with state. Changing its values will not correctly trigger updates. Because see how we're using X property now here? This is actually going to update it. So when we click on this, it needs to update. But as just a normal JavaScript variable, that's not going to cut it. In order to actually properly update, like with Svelte, you need to wrap it in state. And now if we do that, it's working. And as you see, when we click this, it updates. And everything just works because now this X property is used to, if we kind of look around, it's used to make the X scale. And the X scale determines, what is the range of data? What are the X ticks? Because the X ticks are based on the X scale. And the X scale is based on whatever property we're looking at. And it's all just working. And again, if I get rid of the console, the X property is also the label there. So as you see, we're actually looking at the label, we're looking at the property, and that's all just working. But we can actually make it even a little better with animations. So now we could say with the circles, we're going to, any transition they have is going to, so transition, we're going to say any property should take, let's say 500 milliseconds with an ease function. So now if I do that, you can see it actually moves over like that. And so now we're animating, now we're making it interactive. Now we're getting pretty advanced charts. And so let's do the same exact treatment for the Y property. This one right here, all we need to do is wrap it in a state. Copy this pretty much. And this could be the Y property. We could call it, the independent variable, whatever you want to call it. And the values, the options are going to be race time. And let's take a look at position. And so let's actually, because right now we want it to show that. So, oops, it's getting controlled by X property. We want Y property to control it. And right now it works. There we go. But we actually need to update these to make sense with it. So let's say race space time, and then let's say position. And so now you can choose position, you can choose the length, you can choose the weight, and you can see how it all interacts. And so now you can actually, now it's pretty fun. When you're making a data visualization, you actually get a better sense of the data you're working with. Like what you can see is that Pepper is more compact of a pig because, that still says weight high. Because if you look at the weights of the pigs, you can see that Pepper and Bear have the same exact weight. But when you look at the lengths, you can see Pepper is actually a fair bit longer. So Pepper is more solid and compacted and Bear is a bit more, lanky. And you can see that, for example, with the race times, you can see Piggy Smalls is generally, very fast, while Bear is, Bear's kind of all over the place. Bear is sometimes the fastest, I believe, and the slowest. And you can see that pepper is generally, slower. So great, that is actually a fully interactive chart. That is everything you need to know now to make any data visualization you want. Now you know, because every single pattern you see here is the ones you're going to use. Like the same margin pattern with this group, which I scrolled by over here, with the SVG, with the width and the height, and the group with the margins. That is in binding to the client width. That is exactly the patterns you're going to use everywhere. And as you see, it's fully responsive now. And again, with this, because it's just binding to the length of the width of the div, you can style it to have a width of 300 pixels, and it does just work. And I can change it to 500, and it just straight up works. But let's say we want to look at another data set, or we want to ask another question about these pigs, and we want to use a scatter plot. Do I just copy and paste everything? That's, a fair bit of work, and I just don't feel like doing it. So let's turn this into a component. But before we do, I just want to once again reiterate, this is everything. We made it responsive. We made it interactive using state and, different properties that we can go through, where every single thing is now reactive to it. All the X scales, all of the ticks, any sort of data you put into this, everything is just going to just work. And then we have animations with it. And that is pretty much everything you need. And you can see from here, it is really just about tweaking. Like, use some CSS, change the stroke widths. Instead of having black, maybe make it gray or something like that. Give it a title. But as you see, this is pretty much everything you need to know. But let's make it a component just to make it a little better. So let's make a scatterplot dot svelte. So now that we have that, let's go over here and let's pretty much take all of this. Well, actually, let me see. Yeah, let's take all of this. Let's take all this too. Put this over here. And so we're not using it. So what we want to do is we see some red lines. So let's fix any red lines that we see. So the chart width here, let's bring that on over. And let's just put that here. And I wish this would show more red, like Visual Studio Code, but a lot of this stuff doesn't exist, like margin and whatnot. So anything that doesn't exist here, you know what? Let's actually just break everything. And let's bring the scatter plot in. So let's import the scatter plot from /scatterplot.svelte. And let's use it. So let's slap that thing down. Here it is, scatter plot. Because now we're going to have this actually yell at us. Okay, so things like chart height is not defined. So let's go over to chart height. So let's go over here and we see that we don't have that. So let's take that, put that over here. All right, margin is not defined. And now for this, just to have a little more customization, let's pass it in. So let's say let this is equal to props. Whoops. Let's have it where you can pass things in. So let's have it where you can actually pass the margin in. And so now we have that, and whoops, not there. We want to go over here. We have our margin somewhere. Where's that at? Here it is. We can actually pass that in to this chart. So margin. There we go. And now what's not? Inner chart height is not defined. Oh, so we need to actually calculate all that now. So again, this might feel a little chaotic. It's easier when you're doing it on VS Code and you can see all the red stuff and just keep copying and pasting until it stops complaining. So now we can see X-Tix is not defined. Let's just find that. There we go. Put that over here. X scale is, oh, I didn't bring that over. Let's bring that over. Where is that? X scale is over here. Let's bring the color scale while we're at it, because I have a feeling it's going to complain about that. There we go. D3 is not defined because we're using D3 in here, over here. So let's import D3 into this file. Import star as D3 from D3. Data is not defined. Well, let's just pass that in. And you'll see why I'm doing it like this very soon. So right now I said we're going to pass in data, but we need to actually pass in data. So data. Oh, and I did a little shorthand here. So in Svelte, when you have the property data, because we said it should be the property data, if it's the same as the variable you're passing in, you can just write it like this in curly brackets. So X property is not defined. So there we go. Now we're starting to talk here. So let's see. So let's give it in the X property, Y property. So that it's still complaining that it's unknown, but now we're starting to get into because we didn't pass it in. So let's give it the X property, the Y property, the color property. Still says X property is not defined. So let's take a look. Thought I passed that in. Property. I didn't even notice that. X property. Hope I didn't copy and paste other things incorrectly. Oh yeah, there we go. There we go. Oh, whoa. Now we have a chart over here. Things are starting to look a little better. I wish it was complaining more. Color property. Are we getting that? We don't have the color property. There we go. You know, is that console complaining? Oh, there we go. We want more stuff. Color map is not defined. Well, let's bring that in. Color map. And now over here, it's a lot of scrolling, a lot of copying and pasting, but we're almost finished. And I'll show you why we want to do this. There we go. We have everything now. We actually have it. So now what we can do is take all of this, hit delete. Now we don't need any of this style stuff anymore. Hit delete. And now you see, oh, we actually don't need any of this anymore. Hit delete. Don't need to inspect something that's not there. And now look how small the code suddenly got. You can see that we have our margin that we passed in, so everything still works. So you can see over here, right now we have all of our properties and sort of variables like our chart width, our chart height, our data, which is updated in this on mount, our X property, our Y property, our color property, and all of that is just being passed into here. So for example, what I could so easily do now, and technically, you know, we don't even need this. So this is everything you need for the chart without any interactivity, all in one file, way smaller. And so the real reason I wanted to do this is because now it's so easy to just do this. Let's make another chart. Boom, there's another one. And you can see if I want to, instead of just like of doing that, if I want to do X properties equal to waist, and then I want to like compare their dimensions, Y property is equal to height. You can see this now is actually the waist and the height of the pigs. And again, here's some style tweaks that you could do later, maybe rotate the text a little bit. But you can see here's the waist and the height of the pigs. And there's a lot of overlap because I only took data from one of the seasons, but I need to collect more data where the pigs actually grow and their weights and lengths change. But right now, all their data points are on top of each other. But just like that, we have a very quick and easy way to just spam these and just add more and more scatter plots and investigate as many things as we want. Like, you know, for example, if I want to go to the Pokemon API, and there it is. So let's take a look at some Pokemon. So let's see. Let's get some Pokemon. Let's get 40 of them. Is that working? Only has the name and the URL. Okay, I see how this is. If you get a bunch of them, limit is equal to 100. If you want to get a bunch of them at once, it's only going to show the name and the URL. But we can actually use that, because then if you just look at, like, for example, Pokemon/1, that will just be Bulbasaur but detailed. And as you see, yeah, there we go. It's got the ability, it's got the cries, the forms, species sprite. Okay, that has all the information we want. So that's good enough for what we want. Because now it's just as easy as this. Let's now make a whole new thing. So let's say, oh yeah, we don't need chart width and height anymore. There we go. So we just need to do this again. So we need PokeData, state of that. And so now what we can do is we can just get PokeData. Actually, let's do it like this. So let's const fetched PokeData is equal to await D3.json. And so that's actually going to need to fetch. So Pokemon, let's do a limit of the first 100 Pokemon. There we go. So let's copy that, put it over here. And let's take a look. What does that look like? I hope this worked. There we go. That works. Results, and we have them all. Let's just say const all results is equal to fetched PokeData dot map. I thought I had something from this. Console.log, let's take a look. Oh, I see what's going on, because it's in results. So, okay, because it's just a object, and then the results are in dot results. So constant result is that dot results dot map, and each of that will give us a Pokemon. And again, I have this commented out just because I don't want to spam their API. And we're going to get the d3.json of the Pokemon.url. And I think that's going to give us just a lot of promises. So let's check it out. So all results. Okay, let's check it out. Data, and that's going to be dot results. And so let's look at the dev tools. It's an array of something. Yep. A lot of promises. So I think what we need to do here is we just need to say dot then. I think we just say data, and when you get the data, just give me the data. All right, that is still a lot of promises. Oh, I see. Okay, this is we can be fine with getting promises, but what we do is we just take this whole thing, we wrap around it, and we say await promise dot all. There we go. Now for each one of these, we have a lot of Pokemon. Oh, cool. Okay, we have height and weight. You know what? Let's take a look at height and weight. So we have Rattata. Do we have any abilities? I mean, what is it called? Their type. Types, there it is. Oh, holy moly, this is a weird object to get. Okay, so that's a really weird object. So let's get all the results and let's kind of loop through it. So let's say const parsed results is equal to all results dot map. Let's get each Pokemon. Let's make an object from it. We'll say the name, and that's the easiest one. So the name of it, actually we don't need the name. Let's just say the weight is Pokemon dot weight. The height is Pokemon dot height. Okay. And now here's the type. So we want its types is an array. So let's get type is Pokemon dot types at 0 dot type dot name. I hope that's everything we want. Let's take a look. Let me add this. There we go, that works. Height is 7, type is grass, weight is 69. Cool. That looks like that works. And now we have all the Poke data. So let's actually just set Poke data is equal to parse results. Sweet. Get rid of the console.log. Oh, and we need a color map. So here's what we can do, because now it's very quick and easy to do this. Let's make a new scatter plot using the, so now the data is going to be equal to Poke data. The X property is now going to be equal to, I think we said, what are the two ones we're doing? We're doing weight and height. Weight, Y property is going to be equal to height, and then the color property is going to be equal to type. There we go. Cool, now we're getting some data. Now here's the thing, we have to make a color map for this. So let's make a Poke color map. So let's say, I think fire is going to be red, grass, green, dark, black. Okay, this is testing me right now. Water is blue. What else is there? There's rock. I hope beige is a type I can use. Ground is going to be brown. I think it should be the opposite. Brown. That feels better. Beige. Thinking, what other types are there? Electric. Flying. Gray. Okay, how are we looking? That's looking pretty good. Again, we can do style things later, but that's looking pretty good. Okay, I'm looking it up, and this is the job of a data visualization developer. It's not just straight up software development where you're looking at just code. You actually have to, what I enjoy about it a lot is that you actually have to research the topic. And what I like is now that we have a scatter plot that's just going to do all the coding for us, we actually get to just look at Pokemon. Let me just copy and paste these so that we can get them all down. So let's go over here. Let's actually just call this YouTube scatter plot in case I lose everything. Walk through. Here we go. Let's hit save on that. Okay. So let's see this. So let's put in a comment. Okay, we have all this. Let's say bug is going to be, and I think it's all lowercase for them. So let's look up some hex code. So Google, I think you can just look up color picker. There we go. I think bug type should be, that's perfect. Let's put that in over here. Let's bring this over here. Bug is going to be that color. We got dragon. Dragon's going to be kind of like a deep kind of blue color. Okay, I think that is every single color for the Pokemon. So let's take a look at it. Sweet, there we are. I think that's everything. Yeah, no, we have ice. Cool. So now it's just that easy. Now the exact same process is you just get Poke data. And you see, because I didn't need any, like here I wanted customization to do all this stuff, but you don't need to do that. So all I needed for the Poke data was literally just this. And then in the on mount, I just fetched the data. And for the Poke API, I had to do a couple sort of data massaging things to get it all sort of how we want it to make a bunch of objects with just width, weight, height, type. I think it would be easy too to look at stats of seeing, do heavier Pokemon tend to have higher defense? I might actually do that. And then we use the same exact margin. Don't have to do this. I could just copy and paste this, make another margin like this, margin 2, and give it a left of 195. And now you can see if I go over here and I give this the margin is equal to margin 2, you can see it's all kind of squished over, but let's just give it the same margin and delete that. We have the color map for the pigs. We have the color map for the Pokemon. And that's it. That's everything. Cool. And now it really just becomes about having fun. Like, that's what I like about data visualization. Like, I'm actually kind of curious, what does the weight of the Pokemon do to the defense stat? I have a theory that the heavier Pokemon have a higher defense stat. Okay, so looking here, it's in the stats array, and it's 0, 1, it's the second one, because I can see the stat is defense. So I can do this, where I can go add it to here, so I could say defense. I could say it's Pokemon.stats at 2, dot base stat. That's a lot. Cool. So now what I could do is, as well, is if we want to see the opposite, I have a feeling we could do Pokemon.stats at, where's speed? We can find speed here. Special attack, special defense, speed. Okay, it's the last one, so that's at position 5. Dot base stat. There we go. I think that's everything. I think we have defense and speed. So now we could go over here and we could say, because now we have these objects that have defense and speed in it, we could just say the Y property is going to be able to be defense. There we go. So as the weight of the Pokemon increases, I have a feeling this is like Venusaur or something like that. You have the defense is way higher. But I have a feeling, and you can see there's a positive relationship, where as this increases, this increases. But I have a feeling we're going to see the opposite for speed. There we go. I think we're seeing that. We're seeing generally, like, not as much of a trend as I was expecting, but some of the really heavy Pokemon seem to be, slower and slower. And so with that, I hope you enjoyed. We got 2 visualizations here. Now that we put it into a component, it became very, very quick and easy to do that. We just needed to focus on pigs and Pokemon at that point once we have the component, and the chart handles the rest. And what did we do from there? We made this one interactive by doing this. And so if we look into the chart, how is it doing all this? We're accepting these properties, and then whatever it gets, because data for this one, the data property is going to be pig data. For this one, the data property is going to be, the data is going to be Pokemon. And it's going to work out what should its width and height be, its inner chart width, its scales, its ticks. And then it's just going to put all of that down and style it to look decently okay. And so, again, that is everything. You now know all the basics you need to know to make charts that are interactive, charts that are responsive, that can adapt to even phone screens. You now know how to make charts that have animations. You now understand scales, how to scale from both things like names to colors, and from data domains to ranges of pixels. And that's everything. I hope you enjoyed. I will be linking this in the description so that you can play around with it if you'd like. And take care.